The night air over San Francisco Bay can cut like a knife. Thick fog rolls in without warning, swallowing the horizon until even the city lights vanish. Beneath that cold gray sky sits a jagged rock barely a mile and a half from shore, Alcatraz Island. To tourists today, it's a haunting monument, but in the 1950s and early 60s, it was America's most fearsome prison, a fortress so secure that the government swore no one could ever escape alive. Everything about Alcatraz was designed to crush the human spirit. The icy currents surrounding the island churn relentlessly, a lethal moat of frigid water and riptides strong enough to pull a man under in seconds. The cell blocks were concrete labyrinths reinforced with steel. Even the smallest screws were inspected daily. Guards armed with rifles patrolled catwalks 24 hours a day. The warden often reminded new arrivals that breaking out was not just dangerous, it's impossible. This reputation drew some of the country's most notorious criminals, bank robbers, mob enforcers, and escape artists who had slipped every other set of bars. Here they faced a brutal routine, silent meals, endless head counts, and a constant echo of clanging iron. Alcatraz wasn't meant merely to imprison bodies, it was built to erase hope. Yet hope is stubborn. Inmates whispered about freedom during yard time, their breath hanging like smoke in the cold bay air. They studied guard schedules, memorized the sound of each key turning in the locks, and dreamed of a night when the tide might finally carry someone to liberty. Guards laughed off these fantasies, convinced that the deadly waters would finish what the prison walls began. But in 1962, three men, Frank Morris and brothers Clarence and John Anglin, quietly began to challenge the legend. Unknown to their captors, they scoured the prison for weaknesses, testing the limits of this so-called unbreakable island. Every clang of a cell door, every gust of the bay wind became part of their calculation. The story of what happened next would ignite headlines around the world, embarrass federal authorities, and spark a mystery that still baffles investigators more than 60 years later. This is the beginning of Alcatraz's greatest escape. The prison break. America said could never happen. A daring plot born in silence, executed in shadows, and etched forever into history. Frank Lee Morris was no ordinary prisoner. Born into poverty and bouncing through foster homes, he learned early that survival meant thinking faster than everyone else. By his teens, he'd mastered lockpicking and quick getaways, earning a reputation as a criminal prodigy. When he landed at Alcatraz in 1960 for bank robbery, guards recognized a man who'd already escaped from another maximum security prison. They watched him closely, yet not closely enough. Two of Morris's cell block neighbors were brothers Clarence and John Anglin, seasoned bank robbers from Georgia who'd grown up working with their hands on farms and construction sites. The Anglins shared an unbreakable bond and an easy charm that let them win the trust of other inmates and even a few guards. Like Morris, they had a history of breakouts, including a daring climb over a prison wall in Atlanta. The trio's cells happened to sit side by side in B block, a stroke of luck that turned into a quiet conspiracy. Every great escape begins with patient observation. Over months, Morris studied the prison's daily rhythms, guard rotations, maintenance schedules, even the echo of footsteps along the tier. The Anglins experimented with small tools, spoons from the dining hall, pieces of a broken vacuum cleaner, and a discarded saw blade, testing how much noise they could make before a guard noticed. Their goal? Carve through the back wall of each cell to reach an unguarded utility corridor. The walls were old concrete, thick but brittle from years of salt air. Working at night while a loud prison band played in the recreation hall, they scraped tiny holes behind the air vents, disguising the damage with cardboard and paint. Each man stored the concrete dust in his pockets, sprinkling it inconspicuously during yard time. Progress was agonizingly slow, a few inches a week, all while maintaining the appearance of model prisoners. Escape meant more than reaching the corridor. They needed a way off the island. The bay's frigid water could kill within minutes, so a sturdy flotation device was essential. The Anglin brothers scrounged nearly 50 raincoats from laundry duty and stitched them together into a makeshift raft and life vests. They sealed seams with heat from stolen steam pipes and glue pilfered from the prison workshop. It was a masterpiece of improvisation, light enough to carry, strong enough to ride the cold Pacific currents. Another obstacle, the nightly bed checks. Guards shined flashlights into every cell, expecting to see each man's head on his pillow. The solution was both eerie and ingenious. Using a mixture of soap, toilet paper, and real hair collected from the barber shop, they crafted lifelike dummy heads, painting them with flesh-toned paint from the art shop. Under dim light, the replicas looked perfectly human. Communication had to remain flawless. They whispered plans through air vents and passed notes inside hollow accordion reeds from the prison band. Any slip, a dropped tool, an unexpected search, would mean solitary confinement or worse. Yet night after night, they chipped, sewed, and plotted, feeding off the growing possibility of freedom. By early June 1962, the openings behind their vents were wide enough for a man to squeeze through, and the raft lay hidden above the utility corridor. Morris fine-tuned the final steps. Climb through the corridor to the roof, scale the outer fence, and reach the water unseen. All that remained was choosing the perfect night, when fog and tide would favor their desperate gamble. The impossible was starting to look inevitable. The guards still believed Alcatraz was unbreakable, but within those damp concrete walls, 3 men were ready to prove the world, and the U.S. government, wrong. June 11, 1962, arrived with an ordinary rhythm. The clang of dinner trays, the shuffle of inmates back to their cells, the echoing count that confirmed every man was locked in for the night. Nothing about the evening warned the guards that history was about to unfold. But behind the silent doors of B Block, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers had already set the final stage of their audacious escape. As the lights dimmed, Morris crouched by the hole behind his cell's ventilation grill, a gap now just wide enough for his wiry frame. For months, he had trained his body to slip through tight spaces, and tonight, every scrape of concrete seemed louder than his heartbeat. With a careful tug, the fake vent cover came free. He slid a small duffel through first, a bundle containing a homemade life vest, a few improvised tools, and the precious raincoat raft. Next came the head swap. Each man positioned his crafted dummy, painted soap and paper faces with real human hair, on his pillow, tucking the blanket just so to mimic a sleeping body. In the dim light, the effect was disturbingly lifelike. Guards would pass their flashlights and, at a glance, believe the prisoners were peacefully asleep. Morris wriggled into the hole, shoulders scraping the rough concrete. Behind him, the Anglin brothers did the same. Inside the narrow utility corridor, the air smelled of rust and salt. They climbed a network of pipes upward, their footsteps swallowed by the building's groans and the distant hum of generators. Each creak of metal felt like a gunshot in the stillness. Reaching the roof, they faced their first test of courage. The night was moonless, blanketed in thick fog that clung to the prison like a ghostly shroud. Below, searchlights swept the yard in mechanical arcs. Timing was everything. They lay flat against the cold tar, hearts pounding, until the guards' beams passed. Then they slid across the rooftop to a vent shaft that led down the other side. A 15-foot drop loomed between the roof and the ground near the shoreline. Using a length of electrical cord, they lowered themselves silently into the darkness. Their shoes sank into damp soil as they landed, the scent of seawater stronger now. No alarms, no shouting. The island, for the moment, remained unaware. The final obstacle was the barbed wire perimeter fence. Months earlier, the trio had discovered a weak spot where the wire sagged slightly. They moved quickly, pushing through with practiced precision. Beyond the fence stretched the jagged shoreline and the icy black water of San Francisco Bay. Hidden behind boulders lay their prize, the homemade raft, carefully folded and stashed in advance. Working by feel, they inflated it with a small accordion-like pump fashioned from prison workshop scraps. The hiss of air was almost inaudible over the lapping waves. Minutes later, the raft took shape, an unlikely vessel stitched from raincoats but surprisingly sturdy. At approximately 10:30 p.m., they pushed off. The bay's current grabbed the raft instantly, carrying it into the darkness. No one can say for sure what words, if any, passed between them as the cold mist soaked their clothes and the distant glow of San Francisco flickered through the fog. Did they feel triumph? Fear? Or only the numb focus of men gambling their lives for freedom? Behind them, Alcatraz slept. Guards would not discover the empty cells until the morning count. By then, the impossible had happened. 3 men had slipped past America's most secure prison without a single alarm raised. Whether the frigid water would finish the job or deliver them to freedom remained the final unanswered question of the night. When the morning head count began on June 12, 1962, the routine seemed ordinary. Guards moved through B block, flashlights slicing through the gray dawn. Then a startled officer tapped the bars of Frank Morris's cell. The sleeping figure didn't stir. He reached in to shake the inmate awake, only for the dummy head to roll to the floor, revealing its soap and paper core. A jolt of disbelief swept the cell block. Within minutes, the same discovery was made in the Anglin brothers' cells. The warden's office erupted in chaos. Alarms blared across the island as guards rushed to lock down every corridor and tower. Sirens echoed over the bay, and searchlights crisscrossed the water. The impossible had happened. 3 dangerous men had vanished from the fortress that America believed was escape-proof. Within hours, a massive manhunt was underway. The Coast Guard launched boats to scour the bay's swirling currents. FBI agents, San Francisco police, and Marin County sheriffs combed the shoreline, expecting to find bodies, or at least fragments of a failed attempt. Helicopters hovered overhead while divers plunged into the cold depths, fighting the tides for any sign of the fugitives. Searchers soon found puzzling clues. Near Angel Island, investigators recovered a homemade paddle and a waterproof packet containing personal photos and addresses. A life jacket was discovered floating, waterlogged but intact. Yet, there were no bodies, no raft, and no clear evidence of death. Experts debated the possibilities. Had the trio drowned in the frigid, fast-moving currents? Or had they managed to slip through the maze of inlets and reach the mainland? The FBI leaned toward the drowning theory. Oceanographers pointed to the bay's notorious tides, which could drag a swimmer miles out to sea. Hypothermia would set in within minutes. Their official report concluded that Morris and the Anglin brothers likely perished, though no definitive proof existed. Still, investigators refused to close the case, keeping it active for nearly 2 decades. Rumors began almost immediately. Some locals claimed to have seen a small raft near the Golden Gate Bridge that night. Others reported hearing a car start on the Marin County shore around 1 a.m., as if someone had arranged a getaway vehicle. Theories multiplied. Perhaps the escapees had connections on the outside. Perhaps a hidden boat awaited beyond the fog. Over the years, tantalizing hints emerged. In the 1970s, the Anglin family received unsigned postcards and Christmas cards they believed were from Clarence and John. A childhood friend swore he ran into the brothers in Brazil years later. In 2013, the FBI acknowledged receiving a letter, allegedly from one of the escapees, claiming they had lived quietly for decades and now sought medical help. Handwriting experts couldn't confirm or disprove its authenticity. Forensic scientists later created age-progressed images of the men and used modern tidal analysis to revisit the escape route. Some researchers argued that, if the trio launched at the exact time the tides shifted toward the Golden Gate, survival was possible. The discovery of a decaying raft on a nearby island found shortly after the escape but initially dismissed, fueled speculation that the men reached shore. Yet, despite half a century of investigation, the truth remains elusive. No confirmed sightings, no conclusive evidence of death, and no arrests ever followed. The FBI officially closed the case in 1979, but the U.S. Marshals Service keeps it open, reasoning that until proof of death is found, the fugitives are technically still at large. The Alcatraz escape left Americans captivated and unsettled. If 3 men could outwit the inescapable prison, what else might be possible? The unanswered question, did they die in the bay or live in secret freedom, continues to haunt investigators and thrill storytellers to this day. More than 6 decades have passed since that foggy June night, yet the Alcatraz escape continues to grip imaginations worldwide. What began as a desperate gamble by 3 determined prisoners has grown into one of the most enduring mysteries in American criminal history. The event not only embarrassed federal authorities but also transformed Alcatraz from a feared penitentiary into a legend that tourists and true crime fans still flock to explore. After the breakout, the U.S. government faced harsh criticism. How could a supposedly escape-proof institution be breached so completely? The warden and guards defended their vigilance, but the flawless execution of the plan forced a re-evaluation of prison security across the country. Other maximum security facilities studied the Alcatraz incident, strengthening their own procedures, double-checking ventilation systems, improving cell inspections, and investing in advanced perimeter alarms. Ironically, the escape hastened Alcatraz's decline. The prison was already costly to operate and maintain, and within a year it was slated for closure, officially shutting its doors in 1963. Yet the legend only grew stronger. Books, documentaries, and Hollywood films like Escape from Alcatraz, 1979, turned the fugitives into folk heroes, men who defied the impossible. Tourists now pay to walk the same echoing cell blocks, peering into the very holes Morris and the Anglins carved. Guides point out the weathered dummy heads and the dark corridor that once carried them toward freedom, while visitors imagine the tense silence of that historic night. The mystery's magnetism lies in what we don't know. If the men died in the bay, they achieved a fleeting victory but lost their lives. If they survived, they accomplished the ultimate jailbreak, disappearing into a new life despite the vast manhunt. Over the decades, investigators and amateur sleuths have chased every rumor. Reports of the brothers living in Brazil, an unverified photograph from the 1970s showing 2 men who resembled the Anglins, even that cryptic 2013 letter allegedly from one of the escapees seeking medical care. Each clue sparks debate, but none offers final proof. Family members remain convinced the brothers survived. The Anglin family claims they received occasional unsigned postcards and heard from acquaintances who allegedly spotted Clarence and John abroad. They speak of rare but mysterious phone calls, voices that sounded too familiar to dismiss. Whether these accounts are truth or wishful thinking, they keep the story alive. Modern science has added fresh intrigue. Researchers have used computer modeling to analyze the tides on that specific night. Their conclusion: if the trio launched between 11 p.m. and midnight, precisely when they likely did, the currents could have carried them safely to a spot near Marin Headlands. This scenario lends weight to the idea that survival was not only possible but plausible. Culturally, the Alcatraz escape represents something larger than a prison break. It's a story of audacity, meticulous planning, and the unyielding human drive for freedom. Audiences are drawn to the contrast. A fortress built to crush hope, undone by 3 men with spoons, raincoats, and relentless patience. It challenges our notions of security and reminds us that even the most formidable systems have weaknesses. Today, Alcatraz stands as a national historic landmark. Visitors stroll through its cold corridors, staring at the very cells once occupied by Morris and the Anglin brothers, while the city skyline shimmers across the bay. Rangers recount the escape with a mix of fact and speculation, inviting tourists to decide for themselves. Did the men drown in the icy waters, or are they living under new names somewhere in the world? That question, unanswered for more than 60 years, is the heartbeat of the legend. Whether the escapees died heroes of their own tale or lived quietly in the shadows, their daring flight transformed a forbidding rock into a symbol of ingenuity and defiance. Alcatraz was meant to be unbreakable, but 3 men proved that even the world's strongest walls can never fully contain the human will to be free.